Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Today we are going to talk about the Victorian period, and I'll just give you the introduction in this lecture. This is your lecture number 16, and the class is History of English Literature. So, my dear students, previously we were talking about the Romantic era in the history of English literature. So, by keeping in view those concepts, we'll do a comparative study here of the Victorian period as well. This period was started right after the Romantic era, and it is 1830, and it was ended in 1901. So you can see this is a full-fledged 71 years old period. Okay, so my dear students, Victorian period, I'll tell you some of the characteristics of this period, why this is known as Victorian period, what were the common trends of the society of that time during that era. Okay, so we'll talk about all these things in detail. Okay, what are basically the important aspects of that period? A time of change. So previously a change from one era to another era. Okay, so London becomes most important city in Europe at that time during the Victorian era. Okay, population of London expands from 2 million to 6 million. Okay, shift from ownership of land to modern urban economy. So here influence of industrialization, you can see here, that was a shift of land to modern urban economy. Okay, so impact of industrialism, as I told you before, increase in wealth, world's foremost imperial power. Okay, Victorian people suffered from anxiety, a sense of being displaced person in an age of technological advances. So my dear students, here you'll have to keep in mind all the things, all the aspects of this era, and then you'll see the influence of all these aspects in the writings of that era as well. Okay, so first of all, London, it became the most important city during that era, and then you could see the London's population over here as well. It expands from 2 million to 6 million. So shift from ownership of land to urbanization. So again, the urbanization concept is here. When we were talking about the Romantic era, it was there as well. Like the landless people, they moved to, you can say, the urban areas, to the town, because industries were present over there. In search of employment, they went there, they migrated over there, and they became the working class of the country as well. And then definitely they increased the wealth of, or the economy of the country as well. Okay, so you could see the world's foremost imperial power during that era. Plus Victorian people, they suffered from anxiety and some other psychological problems as well during that era. So I'll tell you through different novels the depiction of you can say different characters. You could see the elements of anxiety and the psychological illness factors are there in their personalities, and you could see them in the novels and other writings. All right, so basically why they were feeling the anxiety, because they had a sense of being displaced persons in an age of technological advances. So basically technology was on its peak during the Victorian era, so people, they felt a lot of anxiety just because they used to feel displaced, as they were nowhere at that time during the advancements of technologies. All right, Queen Victoria and the Victorian temper. So this is the picture of the Queen Victoria here. Okay, she ruled over England from 1837 to 1901. So my dear students, as I told you that the Victorian era was started in 1830 and it was ended in 1901 again. So this whole Victorian period, you could see, or the Queen Victoria's period, that is comprised of this very duration, and she ruled on England from 1837 to 1901. Exemplifies Victorian qualities. These are the Victorian qualities. Okay, earnestness, moral responsibility, domestic propriety. Fine, so this is domestic modesty as well. Okay, and the moral responsibility. So here you could see the focus is on earnestness, on morality, on domestic issues. All right, the Victorian period was an age of transition. every period is basically an age of transition. But when we were talking about the classical period or the modern era, you could see at the end of the classical period, some of the romantic poets they started writing by the end of the classical era. So here this is a period of whole transition, okay, an age characterized by energy and high moral purpose. So my dear students, you have to keep in mind two concepts here. This is an age of energy and high moral purpose. How this is energy? Because industrialization was on its peak, technological developments or advancements were on peak, and it was you can say an age of high moral purpose as well. So by keeping in view the concept of energy and morality, so we'll analyze some of the works as well. We will comment on some of the works of the Victorian age. The Georgian period, okay, this is another period, like it was started in 1911 and it was ended in 1936. It would come after Victorian period, and you can see the the picture of King George over here as well. A reaction against the achievements of the Victorian period, as from the very start of you can say the lectures I have been telling you, my dear students, like you can see, like with the passage of time, when we give a particular name to any particular age, like the romantic period or the Augustan period or the Elizabethan period, so when we move towards another one, you could see like people, they reject the previous doctrines or the old philosophies or the old trends which were being followed in the previous century or in the previous era. So in the Georgian period, again we'll see a reaction against the Victorian age as well. Why this is known as Victorian period? Because Queen Victoria was ruling over England during that period, okay, and you'll see the elements of energy and you can say morality there in the writings of that era as well. My dear students, let me remind you here, we are talking about the Victorian period here in general terms, not in terms of literature particularly, okay. So what was basically going on at that time, and there was frustration, there was anxiety among the people of the society. Why? Because they were feeling that they were nowhere, they had that inferiority complex at that time. So my dear students, by keeping in view everything, we'll comment on certain things here, and the things would be very easy for you to analyze later on in future when you talk about any Victorian novel or any Victorian poem. So it would be very easy for you to analyze it. All right. The early Victorian period, basically we have divided Victorian period into two phases. One is early Victorian period and the second one is the later Victorian period. So you can see the trends are different in the early Victorian period and the later Victorian period, okay. The early Victorian period was started in 1830 and was ended in 1848, and the rest of the period of 1848 onwards, that would be later Victorian period. In 1830, the Liverpool and the in 1830, the Liverpool and Manchester Railway opened, the first public railway line in the world. So my dear student, technological advancements are there, like it was the first public railway line in the world during the Victorian period in 1831. By 1850, railway lines connected England's major cities. So this is, you can say, an advancement of technology, that the railway lines, they connected all the cities of England, major cities of England. By 1900, England had 15,195 lines of railroad and an underground rail system beneath London. So basically this is again one of the advancement. The train transformed England's landscape, supported the growth of commerce and shrank the distance between cities. So the cities, they came closer to each other. So you can see the picture of a railway line as well here in this slide. So what happened that, like by, you can say, when they came closer to each other, so definitely it would obviously affect the interaction and their method of writing as well, everything it would interact, okay. So all the cities, they came closer to each other, all right. So basically we'll discuss about this reform bill in detail as well. It extended the right to vote to all males owning property. So whosoever owns property, so he has to cast the vote. Okay, second reform bill passed in 1867. Okay, extended right to vote to working class. So my dear students, here you'll see, like previously, like in 1832 you can see a reform bill. It was passed in England at that time, and it extended the right to vote to all males owning property. So in the second bill that was presented in passed in 1867, it extended right to vote to working class. So my dear students, many times I'm telling you, like when poor people, those who didn't have any kind of property and they were living in you can say kind of rural areas at that time, they moved to urban areas. So after that bill in 1867, you can see that they got the right of vote as well, because most of the society at that time, it was comprised of the working class. Okay, not of that class who used to have property or you used to own property at that time. Basically this is about like whosoever is working in any kind of industry at that time, he or she can you can say cast the vote. So here you can see like these two reforms bills. Okay, one was passed in 1832 and the other one in 1867. The time of troubles, 1830s and 1840s. So how this is the time of trouble, I'll tell you. There was unemployment, okay, there was poverty, there was rioting in the society, slums in large cities, working conditions for women and children were terrible. So basically that is the you can say terrible time in England, and that is in 1830s and 1840s, 2 full decades there in England societies. So basically these are the problems of the English society at that time. There was writing in society, there was poverty and slums in large city. So cities, okay, in large cities as well, there was you can say slums over there. Okay, and the working conditions for women and children were terrible. So that is also known as the time of troubles. Okay. Okay, so my dear students, I told you the problems of the English society at that time was going on there. Okay, so now I'll tell you the impact on Victorian literature of all the happenings. Okay, the novelists of the 1840s and 1850s responded to the industrial and political scene. Okay, for example, Charles Kingsley, The Water Babies, okay, Elizabeth Gaskell, North and South Life of Charlotte Bronte, okay, and then Benjamin Disraeli Sybil. So my dear students, here you'll see like they focused on the industry and political you can say situations of their country at that time, and these are very much evident from their writings. Okay. The Mid-Victorian period, this is another period that was between early Victorian age and the later Victorian age. That is known as the Mid-Victorian period, and it was started in 1848 and was ended in 1870. A time of prosperity. Here you would see the first or the first half, you can say, of the Victorian period. It was full of anxiety, of many psychological problems were going on there. People had inferiority complex that they are nowhere in this industrial revolution, in this world of technology. All right. So my dear students, this is the Mid-Victorian period. Basically it's a time of prosperity, it's a time of improvement, it's a time of stability, it's a time of optimism as well. So you'll see the rays of hope here in the Mid-Victorian period, like after that kind of anxiety, restlessness in the society, unemployment in the society, poverty in the society, like many other issues which were going in here in the society, you can see the rays of hope here in the Mid-Victorian period. And you can see like this whole period from 1848 to 1870, this is an age of prosperity, of improvement, of you can say stability, and of optimism as well. People found hope here during this period. All right. So that is why you could see like at the start of the lecture today, I told you like how we divided Victorian period into two eras. One is early Victorian and the other one is later Victorian. So in the early Victorian, basically the trends were different. There was restlessness in the society. Many issues were going on in the first period, you can say, or in the first half of the Victorian period, and then the things are quite stable. There is you can say optimism in the society as well. The society was going in another direction, right? So my dear students, basically this is the point. That is why we divided this age into two periods. You would feel, you can say, a sense of both kinds of situations in the writings of that era as well. All right. The Crystal Palace basically is, you can say, an evidence of the modern industry and science. So you could see the picture of the Crystal Palace over there. This is a concrete example of the modern industry. One of the first buildings constructed according to modern architectural principles. So my dear students, here you can see with the advancements of technology, you could see this modern, very huge palaces over here in England, that is known as the Crystal Palace, and you can see like it is based on different modern architecture designs. Fine. The building symbolizes the triumphs of Victorian industry. So basically this is about the Victorian industry. This is a clear-cut example or the symbol of the Victorian industry of that time, that it was on the peak. All right. So another thing which is very much important is the British Empire. All right. Between 1853 and 1880, large-scale immigrations to you can say British colonies. In 1857, Parliament took over the government of India and Queen Victoria became Empress of India. So my dear students, here like we are talking about Indo-Pakistan history as well. All right. So you can say the subcontinent history here. Okay. 1857, like Parliament took over the government of India and Queen Victoria became Empress of India here. Many British people saw the expansion of empire as a moral responsibility. Missionaries spread Christianity in India, Asia and Africa. So here you can see the expansion of British Empire here as well in India, in other parts of Asia as well, and in Africa as well. Fine. So how they spreaded here and there in order to spread their religion, Christianity. My dear students, here let me tell you one thing. In order to rule over the world, you'll have to be powerful as far as your religion is concerned, your language is concerned, your military power is concerned. So you'll have to be powerful. Okay. So that is in search of power, or in order to make themselves stable. What happened? They ruled over India as well, and in many other parts of the world as well. Why? In order to promote their religion over here, plus their language. So this was basically their motivation behind it. All right. Religious debate. Evangelical movement emphasized spiritual transformation of the individual by conversion and a moral Christian life. Their view of life was identical with dissenters. The High Church emphasized the importance of tradition, ritual and authority. The Oxford movement, led by Newman, the broad church, was open to modern ideas. So basically this was the religious debate going on that time. So you can see like certain elements which are involved in this debate as well, like they emphasized on the different kinds of traditions, rituals and authorities at that time. And that another movement that was going on in England at that time by Newman, that is known as the Oxford movement, and the broad church was open to modern cities. So my dear students, here they were in search of spreading up the religion everywhere in the whole world. So that is why you can say they opened you can say the broad church everywhere as well. Okay. So in order to promote modern or the liberal ideas all over the world. Another concept which was going on there in the Victorian age, that is of utilitarianism. Okay. This idea derived from the ideas of Jeremy Bentham and his disciple James Mill, the father of John Stuart Mill. Okay. Rationalist test of value, the greatest good for the greatest number. Utilitarianism failed to recognize people's spiritual needs. So basically utilitarianism focused on you can say the benefits of the people in the society, like the greatest good for the greatest number. Okay, they were trying to give rights to the people of the society as far as their financial problems are concerned, to provide them the employment as well, but they, you can say, they failed to focus on their spiritual needs. They did not recognize their spiritual needs. So this was the drawback of, you can say, utilitarianism, because they just focus on the materialistic side of the people. They just ignored their spiritual, you can say, needs. Challenges to religious belief just because of utilitarianism. Here you can see, like in the Victorian period, I told you, like the focus is on spreading up the Christianity. Why? Because Christianity was not that much dominating because of the utilitarianism concept, to provide employment, to provide facilities, or to provide opportunities to all people of the society. That was the motive of the utilitarianism. So in the Victorian era, the focus was changed. You can say it was inclined towards promoting Christianity. That was their religion. Okay. Challenges to religious beliefs: science, Huxley, okay, Darwin, the origin of species and the descent of man, okay, higher criticism, examination of the Bible as a mere text of history, source studies, geology, astronomy. So my dear students, here you can see, like, these are the challenges to the religious beliefs, and you can see different writings as well you would see over here, and different inventions which were going on before the Victorian period as well, and the geology and astronomy. These were basically the challenges to the set religious beliefs of that time. All right, the late Victorian period. Here we are going to talk about the late Victorian period that was started in 1870 and ended in 1901. Decay of Victorian values. Victorian values, which we talked about before. Okay, British imperialism, Boer, war, Irish question, Bismarck, Germany became a rival power. Okay, and then United States became a rival power. Economic depression led to mass immigration, and then socialism. My dear students, here, that is why I was telling you before as well, like you will see a total change in the later Victorian period, because the society was stable. There was optimism in the society as well, and you can say there were a lot of opportunities for the people to avail, even during the mid-Victorian period. So my dear students, when you are in power, so definitely you'll have to face the resistance as well from the opponent parties. So here you'll see two opponents, or the two rivals here. One is Germany and the other one is United States. So my dear student, these are some of the characteristics of the late Victorian period. Okay, Victorian values which they had set before, you can say before this later half. So you could see these are getting failed here in the later Victorian period. Okay, and then there is economic depression leads to mass immigration as well. People, they started migrating to other you can say countries, or to other cities as well, and there is a problem of socialism. Okay, my dear students, here, as I told you, what were basically the advancements which were taken place in the Victorian period. That is, we were talking about train lines in England, like how people, they started reaching on any place within hours. Okay, before that it was an impossible task for them, and they used to take many days or many hours to travel from one city to another one. Okay, so this is an advancement in the Victorian period, and they become very social as well during this period, and they started migrating as well from one city to another one. So these are the happenings which were going on. Here we're talking about the late Victorian period. It was here our focus is on 1890s. Okay, there was a total breakdown of the Victorian values which were set at the start of the era. All right, like in the early Victorian era, and there was a mood of melancholy as well. Aesthetic movement was going on, the beginning of the modern movement in literature that would come next. Okay, so my dear students, here you'll see like modern literature started taking its place during the Victorian period. As we were talking about classical literature, like romantic writers, they started writing at the end of the classical period, so same is the case over here. Okay, here you can see like there is an entrance of the modern literature here in the history of English literature, and that was started by the end of the Victorian period. Okay, and drawings of Aubrey Beardsley as well. Okay, prose of George Moore and Max Beerbohm. Okay, and the poetry of Ernest Dowson. So these are basically happenings in the 1890s, and there was a downfall of Victorian values. And why? Because people, they moved their attention towards something else at that time. Okay, so here you could see like what was going on, what was introduced at the start of the Victorian period. Everything is going down here in the later Victorian period. Okay, so during the period you can see the downfall of the values, of the thoughts, of the ideas of the people who initiated that very period, because the other period has to take place ultimately. All right, the role of women during that period of anxiety, of other psychological problems which were going on there. Okay, the women question, changing condition of women's work created by the Industrial Revolution. So here, when Industrial Revolution it took place, so women work women they started getting employment in different industries. So you can see like there was a change in the conditions of women as well during that period. The Factory Act. So my dear students, here you'll see one more thing. The Factory Act, which was being followed from 1802 to 78, regulations of the condition of labor in mines and factories. Okay, the Custody Act in 1839 gave a mother the right to petition the court for access to his minor children and custody of children under 7 and later 16. The Divorce and Matrimonial Causes Act established to a civil divorce court, and the Married Women's Property Act. So basically the role of women, it was changed in the Victorian period as well. They got employment in different industries, and according to the Factory Act, the rules and regulations, and they they were allowed to work in mines and in factories as well. And there was a Custody Act as well, which gave a mother the right to petition the court to get her children, those who are, you can say, very young, and those who are under 7 and later 16 as well. Women, they became powerful during the Victorian era, you can see. Okay, why? Because they got these rights to get any kind of work in the industry. They had these rights to have their children, those who are very young or those who are, you can say, under 7 and later 16. They can keep them along. All right, and then one more thing, the Divorce and the Matrimonial Causes Act established a civil divorce court as well. So women, they started getting rights in the later Victorian period. Okay, and Married Women's Property Act as well. So my dear students, before this period, women, they were not allowed to work, and they didn't have any access to the factories, to you can say to different industries of that time. So my dear students, here you have to keep in mind, like when women, they got empowerment in the society, so definitely the situation of the society also got changed, and it went into an entirely you can say different direction. Okay, after these kinds of acts. So my dear student, what is the point of telling you all these things is that, like, you should should be familiar with what is happening during that time in that very particular society, what was basically the role of women in that society, what people used to do during that era. Okay, so my dear students, here that is why you'll see many women writers as well, because when they got power in the society, so they started writing, or you can say they started publishing their works as well. Okay, so you'll see lot of Victorian women writers during this era as well. Fine. Educational opportunities for women. First, women's college established in 1848 in London. By the end of Victoria's reign, women could take degrees at 12 university colleges. So my dear students, here you'll see, like, with the passage of time, previously, so here you could see like why we'll get too many Victorian female writers here, because women, they started getting their rights in the society, how to live their lives in the society. They had complete authority on their lives. They got the employments, they got the educational opportunities as well. They had the right to keep their kids with them. Plus, they can get themselves educated easily because there were too many, universities over there. Okay, first women college here, you can see like it was established in 1848 in London, and then by the end of Victoria's reign, women could take degrees at 12 university colleges. So previously, women was nowhere. That's why we didn't have any women author previously. So my dear student, what is the point of telling you about the women university is that we'll get many Victorian women writers here in the Victorian age. Okay, so my dear students, you'll have to keep in mind why, because women became more powerful during that era. Okay, they got the opportunities to get education in different universities and in colleges, and you could see the first women college that was established in 1848 in London as well. So it was the first women college where the women could get education easily. Okay. Working condition for women. Bad working conditions and unemployment drove thousands of women into prostitution. So basically that was the problem at that time. So here, my dear students, because of the poor working condition, and women, they didn't get any kind of respect from the society, and they didn't have employment opportunities as well. So most of them, they adopted this profession, prostitution, as a profession in their lives. Okay, the only occupation at which an unmarried middle class women could earn a living and maintain some claim to identity was that of a governess. So that was the only job which she can do. Okay, so you can say that is why there was a lot of sins in the society as well, because women, they were not allowed to do any kind of job during that period. So they just had to take care of kids of the elite class families, or to take care of some family members of their families. Fine. So that was the only occupation they were allowed to do. All right. Victorian women and the home. Victorian society was preoccupied with the very nature of women. So here you can see, maybe because of Queen Victoria, so here you can see that there is women, they were on the top during the Victorian era. Protected and enshrined within the home, her role was to create a place of peace where man could take refuge from the difficulties of modern life. So basically this age is very much occupied with the very nature of women, and it was their task to protect the home and to create a place where man could take refuge from the difficulties of the modern life. So what was basically the modern life? That is industrialization and their life which is full of technological advancements. Fine. So this home is a place where women used to live. It was her responsibility to make it a peaceful place for man. So at that time it was their responsibility. So my dear students, now I'll focus on the literacy, publications and readings. By the end of the century, literacy was almost universal. So here you can see, like as I was telling you before as well, women education was also compulsory for everybody, and there were a lot of opportunities for women to get themselves educated from different colleges and universities. So my dear students, by the end of the century, So compulsory national education required to the age of 10, all right, due to technological advances and explosion of things to read, including newspaper, periodicals and books. Growth of the periodical, novel and short fiction were published in serial forms. The reading public expected literature to eliminate social problems. Okay, my dear students, this is a very important aspect because there was hustle and bustle in the society at the start of the Victorian period, because industrialization was on the top, urbanization was there, and you can say people were in inferiority complex at that time, like what is happening with us, or maybe they're lacking behind in the world of advancements. Fine. So my dear students, here you will see we are talking about the later Victorian period. So here you could see by the end of this century, literacy was almost universal. So literacy, what is basically the definition of literacy? It is like you can read and you can write, all right? Compulsory national education that was required for the kids age of 10, and due to the technological advances and explosion of things to read, including newspapers. So what is happening in the society, there was a kind of explosion over there, and people, they started reading newspapers, periodicals and books in order to know about you can say different technologies, okay, of about different industries, what is happening there. They got an awareness that was a need of the time as well. My dear student, whenever they had to apply for jobs somewhere, so they had to get the information from somewhere. As you know that that was a literary society as well, like almost all of the people, they were not educated, but at least they were literal at that time. So my dear students, they started reading the books, periodicals and newspapers in order to get the information and in order to know about the trends in the society, what is basically happening. Okay, previously it was happening as well, but now, as you can say, with the promotion of education in the society, they started reading the newspaper, the periodicals and the books as well. Okay, the growth of the periodical plus the novels and the short fiction were published in serial forms, like women, they had to stay at home, might be, but still they could read novels and some short stories, okay, fictional short stories kind of things while staying at the homes. The reading public expected literature to eliminate social problems. So my dear student, this is a very universal thing. If you promote literature in the society, so definitely it would eliminate social problems from the society, and there won't be any element of anxiety, of you can say other psychological problems which would be there in the society. You can remove those problems by spreading up literature in the society, because literature gives you relief and it puts you in certain circumstances, certain situations where you can put yourself there, okay, and then definitely you'll analyze the situation. And so if that thing happens to you on any stage of your life, so definitely you know how to cope up with the situation. Okay, so definitely in order to eliminate or to remove the social problems. So my dear students, here you could say, like, we took a start from the promotion of education, like how they made it you can say not educated exactly the you can say literacy society, okay, and then they promoted education everywhere. At least all the people of the society, they could read and they could write, and then you can say it would automatically raise their literature level as well. Okay, my dear students, women, they used to stay at home. Their task was to take care of the home and to provide comfort to men who had at that time too many problems of the modern world, how to cope up with the world of advancements of technology. So my dear students, here you can see at least women, while living at home, they can even read, they can write the novels as well. That is why you'll see many Victorian women writers over here in this era. So my dear students, that was all happening during the early Victorian period plus the later Victorian period. Okay, how did they eliminate the social problems or the different crimes from the society? Previously, women, they were not educated, they were not allowed to work in the factories, in the industry. So my dear students, they adopted prostitution as their profession, and they promoted, you can say, in this way many crimes were being promoted over there in that very particular society. With the passage of time, after different acts, you could find that women, she got power in the society. As far as her rights are concerned, she could keep her kids with herself, okay, and plus she could get education, plus she could get employment as well easily. And you could see that because of that thing, education was also being promoted at that time. And by the end of the 19th century, almost all of the society was, you can say, literate, all right. They could read, they could write, all right. So that is why you will see a lot of other writers, not only female writers, other writers as well during the Victorian period, because literacy was promoted and literacy was very much common in that society. So people, even whenever they could write, they could read as well. So it eliminated the social problems as well, the hustle and bustle. Ultimately they had to overcome those problems. They had to eliminate those problems from the society. So what happened, they promoted their education in the society. And then with the passage of time, literature, like by spreading up different newspaper, periodicals, novels, short stories in the society, they eliminated that social problem, the hustle bustle which was going on at the start of the Victorian period, plus the social crimes which were there. So people, they got much awareness what to do and what to not to do, okay. So basically this is by spreading up the literature. So this is a universal thing as well, like whenever literature is present in any society, like people, they read and they produce literature as well. So definitely there won't be social problems as such present in that very society. How? Because people will get to know about the frustration of the different characters in the novel, and definitely after facing certain kind of consequences, so definitely they won't do it next time and they won't apply it in their lives. So they'll learn a lesson unconsciously from reading a novel or a short story. Okay. Now come to the point, that is the Victorian novel. Here, my dear students, we took a start with the Victorian age in general terms, and then different trends were going on there. Anxiety, psychological diseases were there, and you can say there was quite a lot of disturbance at the start of the Victorian period. And then we saw a kind of relief in the mid-Victorian period, and then society is quite stable in the later Victorian period. So definitely what is basically the purpose to tell you about both the periods, like the division within the period, that is the early Victorian and the later Victorian period. Like you'll see its effect on the writings of the people of that era as well. The writers who used to write in the first half of the Victorian period, their writings were absolutely different as compared to the writings of the later Victorian period. Okay, come to this one. This is the Victorian novel. The novel was the dominant form in Victorian literature, because novel is written in easy language as well, and it is quite accessible as well to read or to get it from anywhere. So definitely here you'll see like a novel was on the dominating position here. When we were talking about the romantic age, so you could see over there like the romantic poetry was on the top. Here novel is on the top, okay. In Elizabethan time you can see drama was on top. So here like genres, they also differ from period to period, okay. Here our focus would be on novel more, because education was spreaded everywhere, like all the society was you can say the literacy rate was very high, and almost 100% of the population was and almost 100% of the population could read and write. Okay, so this is one of the reasons as well of the novel, spreading of the novel in the society as well. Victorian novel seeks to represent a large and comprehensive social world with a variety of classes. So here you can see working class, there was a low class as well, there was elite class as well, middle class as well, all the classes of society. Here you will see a mixture of all the societies, of all the classes in the Victorian novels as well. So when you read different novels like the Due to Obscure, or you can say other Daniel Daranda and many other novels, so you will see like these novels, they are basically about you can say different classes of society. In the Wuthering Height you'll see different classes of society present there. Okay, Victorian novels are realistic, so they are not imaginative as you can say romantic or the Elizabethan writers they used to be. So here we are talking about Victorian novelists. They are quite realistic. Okay, major themes in the place of the individual in society, the aspiration of the hero or heroine for love or social position. So again the social issues were on the dominating position in the Victorian period. So my dear students, here you will see the theme, major theme was the place of the individual in society plus the aspiration of the hero or heroine for love or social position. So here you can see the elements of love plus the social position. To get any kind of social position in the society, these are basically the major themes of the Victorian novel at that time. Okay, the protagonist or the hero search for fulfillment is emblematic of human condition. So here he is, or you can say she is, in search of the fulfillment of the human conditions. Okay, in order to get any kind of social position in the society. So that was basically their point. For the first time, women were major writers. The Bronte, Elizabeth Gaskell, George Eliot. So these are all female writers, because women, they got education in Victorian age. So you will see most of the female writers are here, like Brontes. These are the two sisters, and then Elizabeth Gaskell, George Eliot. So these are very famous novelists of that era as well. Okay, the Victorian novel was a principal form of entertainment. So this is Victorian novel is not meant to create anxiety among the people. So this is a form of entertainment in order to give people relief from what is happening in the society, in order to provide them rest, or you can say peaceful environment where they can enjoy. Okay, so basically these were some of the themes. So here you'll see you can see some of the pictures of the front pages of different novels as well. This one is Oliver Twist. Okay, this is a very famous novel. The other one is Wuthering Heights, and the third one is Daniel Daranda, and the fourth one is Due to Obscure. So my dear students, here you will see the mixture of all the classes of the society are there, plus there is a relief, because most of the novels, they are based on, might be on, you can say, love stories or some other issues. So basically the purpose was to provide entertainment to the people of the society. So basically that was their purpose. So here you can see I'm just giving you a briefing on the Victorian novel. So we'll discuss about Victorian novel in detail in the next lecture. So my dear students, why for the very first time you can see over here like women, they are coming in the scene, okay, as writers. So previously we didn't know where women were. We had some exceptional cases previously, like of you can say Jane Austen and some of the other, you can say, writers previously. But here you will see like women are on the dominating position. You will find too many women writers in the Victorian age. So this is basically all about the Victorian novel. They used to highlight the social world with a variety of classes. There wasn't any their novels are not just limited to any particular class of society, to a working class, to a low class, or to elite class or aristocratic class only. Basically they mixed up all the societies in their novels in order to represent you can say a broader picture of the society, to compare maybe different societies as well. Okay, and those novelists are not imaginative as compared to Elizabethan writers and to romantic writers. Okay, so they are quite realistic. Okay, and then they are in search of finding a social position, a good position in the society might be. Okay, and then we discussed about the women writers, and I told you why women writers, they were on the dominating position again here in the Victorian novel as well. Okay, Victorian poetry. Okay, Victorian poetry developed in the context of the novel. Poets sought new ways of telling stories in verse. So my dear students, here you'll see like again this is a kind of storytelling. Poet they sought you can say new ways of telling story in form of verse or in form of poetry here. Okay, context is that of a novel again, like the social problems, social issues, social happenings, along with the mixture of this different social classes or to get any social position, and that is of entertainment, that is for entertainment purposes as well. All of the Victorian poets show the strong influence of the Romantics, but they cannot sustain the confidence the Romantics felt in the power of the imagination. So here again, as we were talking about the Victorian novelists, they were realistic. So here they had, strong, Victorian poets, they had strong influence of the Romanticism here, but here you'll see like they lacked imagination. Okay, the same is the case with the Victorian novels. They were realistic. So my dear students, here poetry is also based on realism over here in the Victorian era. Victorian poets often rewrite romantic poems with a sense of belatedness. So basically that was a common tradition among the Victorian poets, that they used to rewrite romantic poems. Dramatic monologue, the idea of creating a lyrical poem in the voice of speaker, ironically distinct from the poet, is the great achievement of Victorian poetry. So my dear student, dramatic monologue is a creation of Victorian poetry. So this is the greatest achievement as well of the Victorian poetry. So what basically is a dramatic monologue? I told you when we were doing literary terms as well, this is the idea of creating a lyric poem in the voice of a speaker, ironically distinct from the poet. Okay, so basically you present a speaker and the speaker is engaged in a conversation with himself here. So this is known as a dramatic monologue, and audience is listening to you. Basically this the element of imagination again here is present in dramatic monologue. So to some extent they followed the tradition of the romantic poets here in the Victorian era as well, but they were again quite realistic. So there you can say their writings are full of irony as well, and dramatic monologue, one of the ironical attitudes towards society. Okay, Victorian poetry is pictorial. Poets use details to construct visual images that represent the emotion or situation the poet concerns. So pictorial, they used to present everything in form of description or in form of pictorial description. How? In order to create some kind of live expression in the mind of the reader. So here you'll see like visual images are there in their novels, in their poetry. So they usually use details to construct visual images. Okay, so same thing I'm repeating here, like pictorial description of the things in order to represent the emotion or situation the poem concerns. So basically in order to present that very theme or or a very particular emotion or a situation, they used to give visual images in their poems as well. Conflict between private poetic self and public social role. So my dear students, here you will see in their poetry, in Victorian poetry, you will see a conflict between private life of a poet and the public social role as well. Poets are considered to be very sensitive, but this Victorian age is an era of advancement, an era of technology. So here basically this is a conflict. So maybe you can see that's why we don't have much you can say poets here in this era as compared to novelists, because they found a conflict between their private life and their social life. All right. Victorian drama. Let's talk something about Victorian drama as well. So the theatre was a flourishing and popular institution during the Victorian period. So here you will see again the revival of theatre over here as well. The popularity of theatre influenced other genres as well. Okay, Bernard Shaw and Oscar Wilde transformed British theatre with their comic masterpiece. So here you will see it was theatre was very much flourishing here. So we'll talk about different dramatists as well, like Bernard Shaw and Oscar Wilde. Okay, so they produced comic dramas and they filled here you'll see a transformation of British theatre over here during the Victorian period as well. Today's lecture was taken from these three you can say reference. Today's lecture was taken from these three sources. One is A Critical History of English Literature by David Ditches, A Critical History of English Literature by Dr. Mullick, and the last one is the Norton Anthology of English Literature, Norton Topics Online. So you can search about these topics online on internet, fine. So in order to know about different topics in detail. So my dear students, today we discussed about the Victorian period in the history of English literature. So what basically that period is, when industry was on the top, technological advancements were going on in the first half of the period, and then you'll see stability, optimism in the mid-Victorian period, and then you'll see like an entire difference in the later Victorian period. They started writing their novels in that era. So what basically the point here is, like, they promoted education in the society during the Victorian era, and that is why that gave rise to more novelists in the society. And in order to reduce the crime level or the social problems in the society, they promoted this reading culture in their society. Plus there was a lot of tradition. They promoted education in the society, and that is why we got too many female writers during the Victorian age. Previously we didn't have much. Alright, so my dear students, here again by drawing a comparison of the Romantic age and the Victorian age, you'll see the difference that the Victorian writers, they are, you can see, more realistic as compared to Romantic writers, because they were imaginative. They were more imaginative, and previously in the classical age they used to emphasize on realism. Again, you could see. So here some of the elements which are present in different eras, you can see it as well. Some of the elements which are entirely, you can say, eliminated from one era if we compare it with another one. So you'll see the differences here. So my dear students, again I'm telling you, you'll have to keep in mind the broader aspects, only the themes of any particular era. What are the trends going on in any particular era? Take it like a story. What is basically the thing which was going on in the society, like the factors which were influencing literature where. So this history of English literature subject would definitely help you in analyzing any kind of drama, novel or poetry in future. Basically you'll have to keep in mind the factors which are involved in the formulation of a literature. Okay, so by keeping in view, you'll have to, for example, when we talk about the Victorian period, so you'll find out the Victorian period elements in their writings. Okay, like the novels which were written in the early Victorian period or in the later Victorian period. So definitely you'll find the difference in both them. So both of them. So you need to have a background knowledge before analyzing any kind of thing. So hope you had enjoyed today's lecture as well. That was very interesting, the Victorian age. So we'll talk about this age in detail in the next lectures. Fine. So hope to see you again. Have a nice day. Allah Hafiz.